Today on Inside Story, bracing for a backlash, fears of a fallout from the American campaign against terrorism. And lunch hour heroes, the men in India who deliver lunch faster than fast food. Hello, I'm Nick Waters. It's been 2 weeks since the United States started bombarding Afghanistan to force the Taliban to hand over Osama bin Laden. The Saudi millionaire is suspected to be behind the September 11th attacks on the US. Despite the Taliban's call for negotiations, Washington has refused to halt the bombing until Osama bin Laden is surrendered. As Renato Reyes reports, there are fears a bigger Islamic backlash could blow up if the war drags and civilian casualties mount.
Every nation has a choice to make. In this conflict, there is no neutral ground.
President George Bush has said, either you are with us or you're with the terrorists. So I think it is a very dangerous approach.
Such brutal attitude by America will unify the whole Afghan nation against the aggressors.
Friday prayers were about to start and Muslims were rushing up the steps of the Kowloon Mosque in Shimsa Choi.
Hurry up, Azan, start.
About 3,000 worshippers attend services at the Jamia Masjid Islamic Center, the biggest mosque in Hong Kong. As in previous occasions, they bowed their heads and prayed for peace, a plea which has gained more urgency as war rages in Afghanistan. Two weeks ago, the US and Britain launched the first phase of their operation to overthrow the Taliban, to capture Osama bin Laden, the Saudi millionaire suspected of masterminding the September 11th attacks on the US. Tons of bombs and cruise missiles have been unleashed to knock out the country's defenses. Among the most sophisticated and lethal of America's arsenal have been deployed to hit Taliban targets and pave the way for a ground assault by Special Forces units. The extent of the civilian casualties cannot be ascertained at this point, but the Taliban says hundreds have been killed so far. Meanwhile, millions of Afghan refugees have been fleeing Afghanistan to neighboring Pakistan and Iran, raising fears of a massive humanitarian crisis. The Saudi millionaire and his Al-Qaeda network have been accused of training terrorists in Afghanistan and attacking American targets around the world. The network has been linked with the hijackers who slammed 3 American airliners into the World Trade Center in New York. And the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., in one of the most horrendous terrorist atrocities ever seen in recent times. Another plane, also hijacked by terrorists, crashed in Pennsylvania. Nearly 6,000 people were killed. The Taliban has refused to surrender Osama bin Laden until it sees evidence that he was behind the assault, a sentiment shared by Hong Kong's Muslim community.
Actually, you don't have a proof that it was done by bin Laden, right? They have no rights to attack a country.
Terror cannot be erased with terror. Terror will have to be erased with peace. I mean, do they know who really perpetuated the attack? No, nobody has the proof, right?
Hong Kong is home to an estimated 80,000 Muslims. Most of them are law-abiding and peaceful.
We Muslims living in Hong Kong.
Although the community has denounced terrorism, many feel the September 11th attacks on the US have reinforced misconceptions about Islam.
News media picks up what is traumatic, what is sensational, and it can happen in a variety of different ways, but Islamic traditions in this way have often been seen only from that angle.
Abu Bakr Ma is an ethnic Chinese Muslim teaching Islam in the Islamic Qasim Tuet Memorial College in Chaiwan, the only Islamic secondary school in Hong Kong.
Usually, the student will ask why Muslim abstain from pork, abstain from eating pork, why the Muslim ladies have to covering their head, or why the Muslim they are all seems fighting with each other. I will explain to them Islam is the religion of peace.
Javed Hassan, a stockbroker, and his wife Mona, who were originally from Islamabad, complained last month to a newspaper about an incident in Macau where 5 of their compatriots were arrested 4 days after the September 11th attacks in the US. The media reported that the Pakistanis might have links with terrorists, only to admit later that they were just overstayers who have since returned home.
I was shocked to hear that, and especially the next day when we heard that it was just a overstay or illegal. They were just illegal immigrants, and then that made me angry.
Arab Americans in the US and Australia, including Sikhs who were mistaken for Muslims, were the first to suffer from the backlash in the aftermath of the attacks on New York and Washington. The London-based human rights group Amnesty International reports more than 700 cases of anti-Muslim abuses in the US. But Arab Americans are not the only targets of hostility. Muslim rage and rioting have broken out in many Islamic countries, denouncing the American offensive against the Taliban. The more militant demonstrators have called for a jihad, a holy war against the US, prompting governments to tighten security at American embassies.
If America is going to hurt Muslim will definitely, are against it.
Local Muslim leader Muhammad Ali Deen once led a rare rally outside the Kowloon Mosque in December 1998 to denounce the American bombing of Iraq, where Washington and Britain are enforcing a no-fly zone. Muslims were outraged over the civilian casualties from Allied airstrikes on Iraq.
What would bring about a lot of angst and probably anger on the streets as well is if innocent people get killed in the process.
Many members of the Taliban, who practice the harshest and most backward form of Islam, came from Islamic seminaries in Pakistan. Throughout the Cold War, the US wielded Islam as a weapon against communism and armed many militants, including Osama bin Laden, to help repel the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan between 1979 and 1989. The Soviets invaded the country to prop up a communist regime, but were later forced to pull out of the Central Asian nation in defeat, leaving behind a trail of wrecked Soviet tanks, airplanes and helicopters. More than 2 decades later, the Americans this time want to go into Afghanistan with a similar mission, to install a pro-American regime once they overthrow the Taliban and seize Osama bin Laden. Washington has enlisted the help of the Afghan opposition, the Northern Alliance, whose human rights abuses were extensively documented by Amnesty International in its 1995 report. These Pakistanis living near the border with Afghanistan were trying to get into Afghanistan to fight alongside the Taliban. Professor Joseph Cheng of City University agrees that many volunteers are likely to heed the call of jihad, but adds that the Taliban lacks the financial resources to absorb them. Instead, he says, more recruits are likely to swell the ranks of suicide bombers, which could lead to more terrorist attacks on American targets.
These volunteers may well become easy targets of radical organizations, and unfortunately, some of them may well easily become suicide bombers.
But American academic Michael DeGolia of Baptist University believes an anti-US backlash is unlikely to erupt.
This is a group of terrorists who, at the most, were supported or sponsored by the Taliban, which is not a recognized state. So if the attack is on the Taliban, I don't think you can even characterize that as an attack on Afghanistan.
The media has raised the specter of a clash of civilizations between the Christian West and the Muslim world. But many scholars and Muslim moderates have discounted such a scenario as unlikely, with many saying that Osama bin Laden is not the true face of Islam.
While I think very few, and there must be again very small disgruntled elements in Pakistan who might support the bin Ladens of this world, but most would be happy to see them brought to justice. I mean, Islam does not tolerate this kind of barbarity.
Mr. Osama bin Laden, he's a hero of the Muslim, right? Then all Muslims love to him. If America attacked to Afghanistan, America losing so many things, because Afghanistan is two-party.
Instead of a clash between civilizations, academics see a clash within the Islamic civilization, between the undemocratic Muslim states and monarchies allied with Washington and their people, many of whom have been denied the freedom to express dissent and have been forced to turn to violence because of state repression. During the latest meeting of the Organization of Islamic Conference last week, some delegates from Muslim countries expressed alarm over American statements that Washington reserves the right to attack other Muslim states, which it believes harbor terrorists. Analysts say the backlash from such a move could fuel a resurgence of Islamic fundamentalism and destabilize such regimes in the Muslim world, or even sweep them out of power.
You may have an escalation of internal conflicts or even civil war.
If one of the fundamentalist groups could gain control, say in Egypt or even in Saudi Arabia, it would bring disaster to the West.
Although Osama bin Laden's terrorist ways have been condemned as un-Islamic and something that must be stopped, his grievances are shared by many peace-loving Muslims, including the brutal Israeli occupation of Palestine, now in its 35th year, and the American double standards in arming the Jewish state, as well as the American policy of starving Iraqis through sanctions to put pressure on Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein, a strategy which has left more than 1 million people dead, mostly children.
And there have been foibles, political foibles by USA, in their handling of a variety of political sensitive issues in quite a militaristic way.
As for the Taliban, whose interpretation of Islam has been spurned by much of the Muslim world, its leader Mullah Muhammad Omar has been quoted as saying that the Taliban's falling out with the US started long before the September 11th attacks, and it was not over religion or terrorism.
When I asked Mullah Omar, then what happened, why they turned against you, he says that they wanted 3 things from us, the Americans. One, they wanted the installation of a gas pipeline project from Turkmenistan to Pakistan via Afghanistan, and the American oil company Unicol was interested in that project. The second thing they wanted was that the Taliban should help the American CIA to establish training camps in Afghanistan for the rebel Muslim youth belonging to Xinjiang province of China. The third thing they wanted from Taliban was to create problems for the Iran.
The world economy has already shown signs that there will be hard times ahead. Unless Muslim grievances are taken seriously by the West, it will be hard to eradicate the root causes of terrorism and promote peace. In the meantime, the world can only pray that a way out of the conflict can be found soon, before it's too late.
Welcome back. When office workers in Hong Kong take their lunch, they go to canteens in their place of work or nearby restaurants for a quick meal. But in India, people can go to work without bothering to bring along their lunch boxes and still enjoy meals prepared by their wives or those specializing in home-cooked food. The men who make this possible are called dabba wallahs, an army of people whose sole job is to race from homes to offices and from towns to cities, delivering bundles of food to offices. Today, new restaurants or fast food joints are giving dabba wallahs tough competition and threatening their livelihoods. But as Rob McBride of Focus Asia reports, some traditions die hard and there's nothing like meals delivered right at your desk and prepared just like at home.
Their whole working day is one long rush hour, so that everyone else can enjoy a lunch hour. The Dabawallas of Mumbai, as much a part of the street scene as the hustle and bustle. A venerable body of men whose role in life is to ensure that lunches prepared in the kitchens of 1,000 suburban homes arrive at 1,000 offices. And operating a complicated delivery system, the intricacies of which seem to be known only to themselves, but which always appears to deliver the cylindrical lunch pails or dubbas on time without any of them going astray. As they start to arrive for another day's work, with breakfast barely an hour behind them, the office workers of Mumbai are already wondering what their dubbas will bring them today. Sanjita and Maya Shah both know the answer to that. The breakfast things have been cleared away and they've begun preparing their husband's lunch. Today, a wholesome mix of rice, vegetables and dai vada to top it off.
They've got to have a good home-cooked meal for lunch, that's for sure.
We give them a good breakfast. That's a routine.
Yes, a routine.
Yes, even if they don't want one, we insist. And then for lunch as well, we make sure they always have a good home-cooked meal.
Yes.
Across town, a kitchen on a different scale. In fact, an apartment that's been turned into an entire kitchen, catering for local businesses by providing lunches like your mother used to make. More than 100 dubbas cooked daily by Anil Asrani and his entrepreneurial band of cooks.
It's purely veg, hygienic and homemade. It's exactly, when somebody cooks from the house, the food which is made by their mother, by their sisters, this food tastes exactly the same.
But proponents of that home-cooked taste are fighting a tough battle. Mumbai is a city under siege from lunchtime newcomers, all offering more cosmopolitan choices for local taste buds. For the union representing Mumbai's Dabawallas, these are tough times.
Yes, there's a lot of competition now from the new restaurants and from companies that have introduced their own canteens for their workers. But as long as there are people who still prefer to have a dabba delivered, then we'll also be there to deliver them.
Back in Anil's kitchen, it's chapati time. That means the lunches are nearly ready and the process of packing 100 tin dubbas can begin. In the Shah household, they're also stacking their dubba, ready to make its journey downtown. What their husbands want for lunch and what they will get may not always be the same. It's the women who decide the menu, the men take potluck.
They never know what they're getting. Only when they open the dubba do they find out what's for lunch. Every day is a surprise.
Time for the Dabawallas to swing into action. For kitchens close to town, bicycle-borne Dabawallas do the job. For deliveries from further out, Mumbai's overstretched train system takes up the strain. From mid-morning, you start to see them arrive on suburban platforms, all heading in the same direction. They choose this time of day to travel because it avoids the crush of the rush hour.
Lala, get on, Lala, just get on.
Yeah. The luggage van becomes their preserve, a fiercely contested space for themselves and their precious cargo. Once on board and underway, they close ranks to stop anyone else from getting in, unless, of course, you're another Dabawalla. This is lunch the hard way. As the green fields start to give way to the outskirts of Mumbai, the journey for most of the passengers is nearing an end. For the dubbas, it's just the beginning. These are lunch boxes that have a schedule to keep. In the heart of downtown Mumbai, the most complex part of the operation. Like a post office sorting room, the dubbas are brought together and then redistributed among other Dabawallas, who will then take them to their final destinations. The system works, but why or how seems to be a Mumbai mystery.
Come late morning, this area outside Churchgate Station becomes a kind of dubba central, as the dubbas from the outlying suburbs are brought here, sorted, and then sent on their way again to offices around town. These people have to move quick, Come 12 o'clock, there'll be plenty of hungry business folk out there expecting to see a dubber on their desk.
The dubbers are on the move again, on carts that also carry the lunch boxes of the dubberwallahs themselves, lunches that won't be eaten until the customers have had theirs. The team working the Fort district of town are running slightly behind today, something to do with the camera crew getting in their way, they say. We're making up the time now, this man told us. A bit of a jog and they'll be back on schedule. Their route takes them through the financial district, an area of town where time is money and where a slow dubberwallah could find himself an out-of-work one. And today, with so much competition from the fast food trade, to keep their business alive, they have to become even faster.
At the peak time of the day, in the run-up to the lunch hour, there's no time for the boys even to go to the toilet. The most important thing is getting lunches to the people on time. That's the only thing that concerns us.
The Bank of India doesn't expect to be kept waiting, and they're not disappointed. Neither are the small stockbroker offices scattered around this area as the Fort District team complete their round on time. And in one of those offices, with the pink pages becoming the tablecloth, the husbands of Sanjita and Maya can finally see what their wives have prepared and what the dubberwallahs have brought.
They are doing important job, definitely. They can reach to so many people. That is good. One good facility. You can have home food in your office on right time, mostly on time.
Lunch from Arnil's kitchen is also arriving on time. But in modern-day Mumbai, with so many other more attractive employment possibilities, the job of a dubberwallah is becoming less alluring. Their numbers have dwindled by half in the past 20 years, a uniquely Mumbai profession that's a slice of the city's heritage and that's in danger of becoming part of its history.
Actually, I'm having my lunch.
I think our numbers will continue to decline in the years to come. I'm secretary of a union that's continuing to lose members. Of course, it's very sad.
Only when everyone else has had their lunch can the dubberwallahs finally settle down to have their own. A brief respite before it's time to do it all again tomorrow. The kind of lunch hour heroes whose endeavours are celebrated in verse.
Dal and rotis from Nala Subara, tiffin for the tellers in the banks of Colaba. Dubbers that have carried 1 million chapatis, brought in from Bandra by the boys in their topis. Chawal and sabji made with love in Andheri, reminders of home and Sister Suneri.
Coming up next week on Inside Story, AIDS, a growing menace in China. What is the SAR doing to prevent the disease from spreading in Hong Kong? That's next week on Inside Story. If you want to contact us with your comments or feedback, please fax 2336 3499 or email insidestory@atv.com.hk. We'd like to hear from you. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you again at the same time next week. From our Inside Story team, goodbye.